can dispatch a femme fatale to sleep with a member of Congress. And we saw that with Fang Fang and Representative Eric Swalwell of California. Or they can dispatch a kindly man to become Dianne Feinstein's personal chauffeur for many years. They are purchasing American land and planting Chinese factories across our country. And now to today's rapidly expanding threat to America, the China threat.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Welcome to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you twice monthly from Washington, D.C. I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 215 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide. If you like what our show's content is, then spread the word. You can subscribe for alerts at theedwinblackshow.com. And if you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by leading members of the Encino Jewish community and Google Audiobooks, which has just released the unabridged audiobook of my global bestseller, IBM and the Holocaust. Thank you, Google, and thank you, audio team, which made it happen. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the Villages, Newton, Massachusetts, Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from Australia, New Zealand, Holland, Sweden, France. I see Italy and Spain, Portugal, Germany, Hungary again. I'll be there soon. Great Britain, Canada, Mexico, India. Oh, yes, I see China and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question limited to today's topics, place one short sentence without preamble in Zoom's QA feature. Now, the Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our disturbing topic, the China threat, part 4 in our series. This in a few minutes after some brief announcements and then reports from the week. At the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released more compelling and hard-hitting episodes. The latest is the painful and unforgettable must-see and must-share World War I Why, which tragically ties a bloody and inexplicable war, World War I, more than a century ago, to all our problems in the world today and the Middle East, and even directly to Hamas. My appearance tour continues. Last week, I visited Wheeling, West Virginia for a 3-state gathering. From there and Eastern Ohio and Pittsburgh, it was a 3-part series on Israel, and we assembled in an absolutely overflowing standing room audience at Temple Shalom. They ran out of chairs, where the majority of the attendees were from local churches. I found them learned and thirsty for more knowledge. I also conducted a question and answer with students at Wheeling High School, where my book, IBM and the Holocaust, has been required classroom reading for years. Next week, I present the inaugural lecture at the new Towson Center for Humanity, Tolerance, and Holocaust Education on May 6th, Yom HaShoah. I will be the first appointed scholar in residence at the International March of the Living at Auschwitz. Get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com www.stand-tall.org/events. And let us meet up in your city. Stand tall. I'm coming your way, I promise. Finally, I remind my viewers of a terrible website you must know about, publishing the ghoulish videos from October 7th. This is the war crime documentation that Israel will need to prosecute after the war. See it at hamasmassacre.net before the deniers win their war of denial. I remind everyone that we are now in the midst of World War J. This is my items from the week. And World War J is the global war against the Jews in Gaza, at home, in America, and indeed roiling through the nations of the world. Bad news streams into my office every minute of every day. I've selected just a few. First, to the Gaza war, where we see just how much the Biden administration, dominated by Jew haters and Israel haters, is financing Hamas and Israel's enemies. The billions for Iran continue. Most people are unaware that a few days ago, Biden personally renewed a $10 billion sanction waiver for Iran, which is the main funder for Hezbollah and one of the main funders of Hamas. In addition, Biden continues to fund the Palestinian Authority, which openly diverts some 16% of its foreign aid to pay salaries to terrorists for killing Jews, paid to slay. First journalistically revealed in my book, Financing the Flames. And it just doesn't stop. Now we find out more about this multi-million-dollar floating pier that Biden is building at the Gaza shore. The project is actually being subcontracted to Qatar, which in turn insisted that a Hamas construction company, Al-Hisi, do most of the work on the ground. To tell us more, we turn to one of the strongest and most articulate voices in the Jewish and pro-Israel community, Carolyn Glick. Take the camera, Carolyn, and tell us about this latest outrage.
Thank you so much for having me on your program today. Look, I think that what's important to note is that this was a project that President Biden announced in the State of the Union address. He insists that there's a terrible humanitarian disaster in Gaza. His words are parroted by Secretary of State Blinken, by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, by USAID Administrator Samantha Power, and many, many other senior officials in the administration, although it's not at all clear what they're basing it on. Certainly not on the raw numbers. All the same, the Americans decided that they wanted to build a temporary port, a sort of pier that would go out 500 meters that would be able to bring in shipments of goods to Gaza. And there was a question of who was going to manage this. They had initially said that U.S. forces were going to do that, and then against the wishes of Israel, the USAID transferred responsibility for building the port to Qatar, which in turn contracted Al-Hisi company that you mentioned to build the port. And just to be clear, Al-Hisi is Hamas's primary contractor for all of its infrastructure, aka tunnels and everything else that they've built in Gaza. They are a wholly owned subsidiary of Hamas. So that Qatar, the United States transferred responsibility for this infrastructure project to Hamas's state sponsor, Qatar, and Qatar transferred responsibility for building and operating the pier to Hamas. And so the U.S. is now making its flagship project a port that will benefit Hamas.
Does the United States government, Blinken and Biden, know that Al-Hisi, which is the Hamas construction company, the Hamas tunnel company, do they know what you have just said, that it is going to be managing this pier for Qatar?
Well, what was reported by Channel 14, which broke the story, is that this was all decided at a meeting of what's called the Cabinet for Gaza that's run by Samantha Power in Cyprus last week. And in attendance were representatives of Qatar and the UAE and the UN, I think, and other entities. Israel was not represented there. And again, Israel said that we object to Qatar having any role in this project, but the United States simply dismissed Israel's position, just as they've been doing on any number of things related to the war in recent weeks. So this is an American project. You know, the United States has basically been trying to go around Israel and undermine Israel's control of Gaza for a couple of weeks now. The parachuting of MREs, of meals ready to eat, combat rations from the U.S. military into Gaza was done, you know, not necessarily behind Israel's back, but uncoordinated with Israel. And there's a sense of growing chaos in the Gaza Strip because of the kinds of actions that the United States is taking without regard to what the actual needs on the ground are and whether what the United States is doing is actually helping or undermining the situation on the ground there. And it seems more like it's a performance art project than it is a humanitarian assistance project where the United States is trying to show that it can push its weight around and order Israel around. But the issue of the port is actually a strategic action by the United States that essentially puts America's thumb, or rather its fist, on the scale on behalf of Hamas and against Israel. So it's very alarming, and it requires some serious investigation by congressional oversight and American organizations and individual and citizens who don't want to be rebuilding Hamas's regime in Gaza.
Just one last question. Why in God's name would the Biden administration go into business knowingly with the Hamas tunnel makers on this multi-million-dollar project?
You know, Henry Kissinger once quipped that Israel doesn't have foreign policy, only domestic policy. I don't think he was right. But I think that more than anything else, when we're looking at the Biden administration's policy in the Middle East, what we're seeing is a playing out of domestic politics on the international level, that the Biden administration is guided by a progressive, woke ideology that is antithetical to Israel's existence in many cases, and certainly among many senior and key members of the administration. First and foremost, the special envoy to the Palestinians, Hadi Amar, who has a history of supporting direct ties between the United States and Hamas, but not only him. And also that they're communicating by attacking Israel with their political base in Michigan and in Nevada and in Minnesota, and really in large cities around the country, where the discourse is dominated by people who despise Israel and have justified Hamas's atrocities of October 7th and really Hamas's goal of genocide.
Well, thank you very much, Carolyn. I know you may have to dash off, but you're welcome to stay for the rest of the show. Thank you, Carolyn Glick, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Now to more Israel, where it took the massacres and mutilations of October 7th for the Israeli community to wake up from their delusion that they were in Midtown Manhattan and finally discover they were actually located in the Middle East, where tribal and desert traditions and generation to generation hatred still govern everyday life. Just yesterday, Kareem Jabbareen, 19-year-old in Jenin City, a territory under the Palestinian Authority, was executed, accused of collaborating with the Israelis. I have the film footage of him being marched through the streets where he was executed by his own twin brother and a hail of about 60 bullets. Yes, his own twin brother. This is the neighborhood just across the line, not far from the modern 21st century Israeli city of Harish. This is the neighborhood. We also learned that the Red Cross has been the secret fixer for terrorist salaries. It is the Red Cross that provides guides and glides convicted terrorists in acquiring and filling out the power of attorney paperwork that allows these killers to get their Palestinian Authority salaries for terrorism and divert them to friends or family for safekeeping while they're in prison. And it is the Red Cross that certifies to the PA every 3 months that its terrorists are still in Israeli jails and therefore qualified to continue receiving cash. This is the same Red Cross that refused to deliver medicines to hostages in Gaza and continues to refuse to demand that hostages be visited to check on their welfare. This is the same Red Cross that has hated Jews for generations, that refused to demand access to extermination camps during the Holocaust, claiming it was an internal affair of the Third Reich. The same Red Cross that has admitted on its website these words, I'm quoting now, January 27th is the anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz in 1945. For the International Committee of the Red Cross, it also marks a failure, the failure to help and protect the millions of people who were exterminated in the death camps. I'm quoting, the ICRC has publicly expressed its regret, that's nice, regret, regarding its impotence and the mistakes it made in dealing with Nazi persecution and genocide, close quote. Never give money to the Red Cross. Never trust the Red Cross. Give the money and the trust to a Christian help group like Samaritan's Purse or any other vetted group. Now to the fake fatality data coming out of Gaza. Plenty of non-combatants are dying in this door-to-door and tunnel-to-tunnel war, and even one is too many. I say one is too many. Notice I did not use the false term innocent civilians, because there are precious few innocent civilians there. Everyone is either in Hamas or one of the numerous other terrorist battalions, or actively supporting their fathers, brothers, uncles, or cousins in Hamas, or they're in a non-military organization such as UNRWA, which is inextricably linked to and involved with Hamas. Even Hamas chief, the chief, Ismail Haniyeh, was an UNRWA teacher who graduated to become the head of Hamas, and it was the same for Dr. Talal Naji, the Secretary General of the Palestinian Front for the Liberation of Palestine General Command. Both of these guys were UNRWA teachers. But now statisticians are beginning to examine the fake numbers coming out of the Hamas-controlled Gaza Health Ministry. They observed the battles have ebbed and flowed in intensity, but the curve goes up at a constant, non-deviated upward rate with no dips. You can draw a straight, steady upward line on that graph. We are told that the overwhelming majority of those killed are women and children, up to 70%. Yet we know that Israel has killed more than 12,000 fighting terrorists. That means every non-terrorist killed is a woman or a child, and 0 men. Is that possible? There are many statistical takedowns of these fake numbers, but one good one can be found at Tablet Magazine, and we will link it in our show notes for this episode. Eve, please do. Now to whether Israel is ethnically cleansing the so-called Palestinians. I say so-called Palestinians because prior to May of 1964, the Israelis were the people known as the Palestinians. Israel has done the world's worst job of ethnic cleansing. They need help. Let's look at the numbers. There were 156,000 Arabs in Israel in 1948. Today, there are more than 2.1 million. In Gaza, there were 80,000 in 1948, and now about 2 million. If Israel is to improve its ethnic cleansing skills, it will need help and advice from the Muslim world, which has done such a good job with the Yazidis, the Armenians, the Christians, and the Jews in the 1950s, and even the PA promises this will be done, ethnic cleansing to every Jew in its midst if it takes over. Now to World War J against Jewish communities. Last October 10, just 3 days after the Gaza massacres, Middlebury College students tried to host a vigil for the victims of the massacre. The dean told them in reviewing the flyer, remove the word Jewish from your posters. Jewish had to be removed. according to Middlebury. Legal action has now been taken, and if this is the climate in Middlebury College, which in the last century was a leading exponent of eugenic genocide against Catholic Canadians, then make a note. Never hire anyone from Middlebury College. Never send a student to Middlebury College, and stand up against anti-Jewish agitation. And now I turn to the Oscars, where Jonathan Glazer, the director of the award-winning film Zone of Interest, which was about Auschwitz, accepted his award by regretting his Jewish identity. Glazer, I join you in regretting your Jewish identity. Virtually the whole Jewish world also refutes your Jewish identity. Hundreds of Hollywood stars have signed a letter attesting to your irredeemable status as a self-hating Jew. I imagine very shortly that'll be thousands. This also brings me to Schmuck Schumer, the highest-ranking elected Jewish person in America. The name Schumer, if you check the name dictionary, means, quote, worthless good for nothing. And in Hebrew, shum means not a thing. Whether you call this guy a Dreckfresser or a Tachaslecker, he is the new poster boy for self-hating Jews. As everyone knows, he had the chutzpah to demand Bibi Netanyahu call for new elections, knowing the Israeli system is a parliamentary system, which means he doesn't call for new elections. That can be achieved by one person in his tenuous multi-party ruling wartime coalition, which is supported by the vast, overwhelming majority of Israelis. Netanyahu can't throw a pebble at Rafah without the consent of his war cabinet and the chief of staff, and he can't order a pizza without the permission of that coalition. Yet Schumer had the gall, while Israel is fighting for its life, being pressed by killers and enemies on all sides, to ask Bibi to call for new elections, and considered asking him to step aside. Schumer even told fellow Democrats not to take a call from Bibi to explain what Israel is doing. This is how the Democrats practice democracy, election interference at the highest level, give aid, comfort, and encouragement to the Hamas enemy, and where an Arab Nazi vote in Michigan is more important than the life of an imperial Jewish child in Israel. Cherem this guy. Never give him a penny of donation. AIPAC, write him off. Primary is tuchus. He is untouchable. He made his choice, and now we will make ours. I'm sorry I don't have the time to mention all the Jews who were stoned, harassed, beaten, or intimidated across America, in central London and elsewhere, as I usually do. But I will get to that in an important episode in 2 weeks, Kristallnacht 2.0, part 4, in which I detail the step-by-step methods that Democrats might use to destroy the Jewish community in the United States if they gain power in the next election. I'm a historian, and I have given you some history, but hear this, oh, is Israel and the Jewish community. The real history is a-comin'. Wake up, miss the train. Now to one of the burning topics of the week, the devastation in Haiti, the immigration threat to our shores, and an island nation that is clearly a failed state that can't be fixed. Haiti has received billions in aid, but has not invested that aid in its education, its health, or its infrastructure. Why can't Haiti be a wonderful place like France, known for its elegant, sugary desserts, its exquisite coffee, and its beauteous Eiffel Tower, as well as its robust economy? So let me just check. The not so obvious record, and we'll see how hell on earth became the Haiti hellhole. Now I'm gonna leave out 99%, but I'll devote an entire episode to this later this year. Haiti was established as a slave state, mainly controlled by the French. The vast majority of its residents were slaves. Perhaps as many 800,000 African slaves were kidnapped into Little Haiti, which occupies a space the size of Maryland. And that's not quite 3 times the number of slaves kidnapped into the entire United States. Most of the islanders were slaves who worked plantations to make France rich in top-grade sugar and premium coffee. Haiti became one of the most valuable colonies in the world, accounting for about 7% of the French national product in value, because France, from Haiti, became a major sugar and coffee distributor worldwide. After the US and French revolutions, Haiti followed suit and in 1804 declared its independence in a horrific and bloody uprising. France never got over it. Years later, in 1825, the French sent in warships to Haiti's harbor and demanded, sit down folks, sit down for this, demanded reparations to compensate French companies for the loss of slavery. How much? About $32 billion in today's money. 14 French warships with 528 cannons threatened to shell Haiti to smithereens unless the agreement was made and the money was paid, sucking the economic life out of Haiti and its banks. Ships with locked storage holds filled with gold sailed continuously from Haiti to France. Historians call this robbery, they call it the French indemnity, where beauteous, chic, and wondrous France is compensated for losing its slaves and compensated by the actual slaves. When Haiti could no longer pay, France established a special bank to loan the money to Haiti to pay it, but at an interest rate so high it amounted to a double indemnity lasting decades, even into the current century. That's right, a double indemnity. Eventually, Wall Street demanded to get in on the imposed impoverishment. National Citibank and a syndicate, which became what we now know as Citibank or Citigroup, invested in the French Reparations Bank. So when the double indemnity, which was not paid, it was actually Wall Street that was not paid. We subsumed the French as the controlling political power in Haiti. And when National Citibank got tired of no payments, it convinced the racist Democratic Wilson regime to invade Haiti. In 1915, American military forces occupied Haiti, long before we entered World War I. And we remained the occupying power for 30 years, till 1934, after Hitler came into office. While we were there, at the point of a gun, we dissolved the parliament, killed thousands of people, enslaved ordinary Haitian citizens to build roads to support the operation. We stole giant parts of Haiti's meager finances. The soldiers were actually taking bags of money and boxes of gold out of the bank. And it all went to Wall Street to make Citibank wealthy. Oh, and the Haiti money also poured into that French bank called the Crédit Industriel et Commercial, the CIC, which helped finance construction of a little something called the Eiffel Tower, based on CIC buying up the predatory loans made to the fake National Bank of Haiti. The long list of American financial slavery continued right to our own times, as the Clinton Foundation has been accused of rapacious exploitation after the Haiti earthquakes. And yes, Haiti paid France, I don't know how you can believe this, $562 million in 2022. Yes, for its own reparations to its own slave masters, tracing from 1804. Finally, in 2003, the first democratically elected president in Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, called on France to pay Haitians $22 billion in reparations, pay them back. The next year, a US engineered coup ousted Aristide. He was kidnapped by the US government and flown in a US military plane to an unknown destination. He had no idea where he was going, and it turned out to be the Central African Republic, where he lived in exile. Now, I left out 99% of this story, but I will tell more in a later show. But if you can't understand why Haiti can't be more like France, ask this: how the hell did the France we know become the France we know? There are many resources on this topic, including a splendid, excellent series in the New York Times, and Eve will post a number of them in show notes. And now to today's rapidly expanding threat to America, the China threat. But first, for an insight, an actual insight with a person, we go to Weiming Chen, a dissident Chinese sculptor on American soil who creates works of art to commemorate Chinese repression, such as the famous Chinese shopper with bags who blocked courageously a Chinese tank. He is here with his interpreter, Jonas. Take it away, and in 3 minutes, guys, tell us what the heck happened. So the man sitting next to you is Weiming Chen, correct?
That's correct.
And he is a sculptor, right?
That's correct.
And he works in concrete and mixed materials, correct?
Yes.
Where is your outdoor gallery and sculptures located?
We're located in Yermo, California, basically 2 hours between, right between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. We're two hours from each side. So.
All right. So what happened to you? And what happened to Weiming Chen? Tell us.
So Weiming started Liberty Sculpture Park in late 2016, and decided to when the pandemic started in China, decided to expose China's unleash of the virus. We don't have we don't have a unified idea of how the virus came to be, but we know as a fact China has blocked the flight to their major cities and unleashed the virus to the world, because they never blocked the international flight. As a matter of fact, when Trump blocked the flight to the United States, he's called racist, and the flights were diverted to Europe, and a lot of the cases and later variants came from Europe. And so Weiming decided to build a sculpture about it, and in 7 months, and that triggers a major wrath from Chinese government, and therefore all the it started a spy case and a bunch of fun stuff. So,
all right, what did they do? What did the Chinese government do?
They have sent spies to the United States, as we all know, and they basically start bribing IRS agents on Chen's the tax records, and then they send people to pose as art collectors who are claim to be Weiming's fan, and then decided to sponsor us, and eventually use that opportunity to put cameras in our studio, and eventually burn down the sculpture after their attempt to to buy out the sculpture failed. So
you mean Chinese agents came into California and planted cameras in your facility and tried to burn down these dissident sculptures? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They're targeting the sculpture that a sculpture named CCP Virus. It is a sculpture consists of half face of Chinese Supreme Leader Xi Jinping and half as a skull, and has a communist symbol by the side. And the repercussion of that is they got caught by U.S. government, and they got prosecuted.
And how many people did the Department of Justice prosecute?
5. but I believe 2 are enlarged because they're in China.
So in the indictment, which I have seen, your colleague, the esteemed Weiming Chen, is identified as something like dissident number 1.
That's correct.
But it's actually the man sitting next to you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And Mr. Chen, would you like to say something to our audience about being in California and being intimidated by Chinese agents within your very home and studio?
OK，他说是
那个你在加州依然被中共威胁是怎么一个感觉？
And please help him out, Jonas.
Yes, I think the Chinese government infiltration is very heavy because have some spy is coming to talk to me. This is American people. His name is Matthew. Also, have some Chinese people come to Sculpture Park, volunteer for work for me, so they can know what I to do. Also, they put the GPS in my car and put the camera in my studio. So,
all right, so you had volunteers, you had art collectors, and they were tracking your car and planted cameras in your studio and ultimately damaged and tried to destroy your works. The Department of Justice has indicted 5, but you're still with us. And it's a vibrant reminder, ladies and gentlemen, that all the things we say about the Chinese threat do not apply to the overwhelming majority of wonderful Chinese people who are in this country and part of the fabric of great American life that we must love. Thank you very much, Chen and Jonas. And now for my monologue. As everyone knows, China has vowed to overtake America completely and dominate the world itself within several years. Not a long distant time off, but soon it plans to do so with military muscle, diplomatic cunning, strategic bribery, steady and quiet infiltration, and an insidious campaign without bullets where possible, but hypersonic missiles where needed. Our government is aware of it, and the Biden administration has facilitated it and is part of it. The name of this episode is The China Threat, and we have had these episodes for years. This is our 4th installment. But the FBI has just inaugurated its own special webpage, also called The China Threat. See it at fbi.gov/investigate/counterintelligence/The China Threat hyphenated. We are being invaded by Chinese military-aged men and women right now, and it means a massive upsurge this year. For many years, till 2020, apprehensions of Chinese nationals averaged about 1,500 per year, just more than 100 per month. But in the first year of the Biden administration, fiscal year 2021, apprehensions spiked to 23,471, an increase of about 1,400%, an increase that was greater than all other countries combined. Experts think that hundreds of thousands of additional Chinese plants are among the million-plus gotaways that we have no idea about. These Chinese are often caught at the southern border carrying expensive Tumi luggage. They speak good English, and all of them know exactly where they're heading and what they're going to do. China's 2017 National Intelligence Law compels compliance by any Chinese national. If he's overseas, he must comply with the CCP's intelligence institutions. The Center for Strategic and International Studies found that over the past 2 decades, 41% of the CCP spies were private Chinese citizens, and that was even before China's National Intelligence Law. China is in every aspect of American life, from Hollywood, which it now owns and controls, to American sports, sufficient that it can make LeBron James a fool, unwilling to criticize Uyghur slave labor making Nike t-shirts and shoes. China created a massive fentanyl pipeline into our country by establishing the precursor chemical routes. It's phenyl bromide, propanol chloride, and sodium borohydride. The Chinese companies responsible for these precursors include the Weiming Chen Technology Company, the Moker New Material Technology Company, Shutong Wang, and Shifang Ruan. But there are scores of additional companies and vendors involved in these precursors. The chemicals are shipped en masse to Mexican cartels, which create the actual fentanyl in raw form and then even use cheap Chinese pill-producing equipment to insert them into other ordinary drugs, masking their deadly nature. The chemicals are smuggled into Mexico and also Canada via ordinary international mail, which Chinese authorities inspect, as you well know. China enables supervising agents, such as a gangster known as the White Wolf, to operate in Mexico, where numerous people of Chinese extraction join him in the process. More than 100,000 people died from drug overdose deaths in the United States in 2022, and the number climbs daily. China operates more than 102 so-called police service stations in 53 countries around the world, with many in America. Several have been shut down by the FBI in America and arrested the agents, but new ones spring up. They hide these so-called police stations in ordinary business buildings, above Chinese restaurants, and in quiet corners of Chinatowns. They can threaten and coerce anyone directly or by intimidating their family back home. We saw what happened with Weiming Chen out there in the desert. They can dispatch a femme fatale to sleep with a member of Congress, propel a local politician to a top seat in Congress. And we saw that with Fang Fang and Representative Eric Swalwell of California. Or they can dispatch a kindly man to become Dianne Feinstein's personal chauffeur for many years. They are purchasing American land and planting Chinese factories across our country. There are more than 5,000 Chinese-owned and operated companies in America. These companies own at least 380,000 acres of farmland and other acreage, often located right near key American military installations. A polluting EV battery maker called Goshen has just sued a tiny West Michigan town, accusing its board of not permitting the company to build a $2.4 billion EV battery plant. China's EV tycoons have promised as recently as late last month to create a, quote, bloodbath, that's a quote, for America's car industry. That comment, that bloodbath comment from China, is what prompted Donald Trump to warn the American auto workers that the present policy of the Biden administration would result in a bloodbath for the industry, which was, of course, misreported by much of the media, which can no longer be relied upon. Everybody knows what TikTok is in America. It's telephonic opium, while in China, it is an educational style NPR type of platform. The US government has just notified governors that Chinese hackers working with Iranian partners are carrying out disruptive cyber attacks against water and sewage systems throughout the country. In a letter just the day before yesterday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Reagan warned that, quote, disabling cyber attacks are striking water and wastewater systems throughout the United States, close quote. A water facility in Pennsylvania, for example, has been attacked by the Chinese hacking group dubbed Volt Typhoon. And as is now obvious, China has ensnared Joe Biden, the president of the United States, in a criminal conspiracy to commit RICO. Let me give it to you straight. That's 18 USC chapter 1962 and its conspiracy subsections in which the participant, passive or active, need not receive anything so long as he participates. And under every bribery interpretation I've ever known for the past 50 years, bribing or enriching the son, daughter, in-laws, and even grandchildren's of an individual extends a direct, real, and criminal benefit to that individual whose family is being enriched. Bribe the son and brother as part of the influence peddling scheme, and you facilitate it with phone calls and passive encouragement, you are guilty. The Congress will be making criminal referrals shortly for prosecution, and the acceleration of the push to impeach Joe Biden is now in high speed for RICO conspiracy and many other crimes. And yes, AOC, RICO is an actual enumerated crime. Now, I've left out so much, but our favorite Democratic Party foreign policy analyst, Josh Block, will pick it up. Go, Josh, and tell us for real. Is it as bad as I say, or is it really much worse?
Well, Edwin, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. You know, you've got a situation where the Chinese government, with its presence, in particular those police stations that they've opened up in the United States, in major cities, and around the world, those are I think some of the most insidious tools that they're using in a pincer movement to go after folks like Weiming who are here in the United States and speaking out against repression in China. And so between threatening people's families back home and then using these sort of unofficial, official offices staffed by Chinese police officers, intelligence officials, and who are seeking to settle disputes in Chinatowns, in Chinese communities in the United States, and building networks to keep tabs on it and make life more difficult for Mr. Chen and others. And I think when you hear the direct story of what their agents did, coming to the United States, approaching him under false pretenses, attempting to infiltrate his business, and then ultimately burning it down and destroying it. So these are mob-like, thug-like tactics. They're the kinds of things that the mob and the underworld resort to. And what you see here is a nation state that's engaging in this behavior here in the United States, and that's of course a threat to our national security. And when you see the degree to which this is not just behavior, by the way, that's been confined to the Chinese. We face these days a Russia, China, Iran, North Korea axis. And of course, all the proxies of the Iranians extend into that. You saw maybe this week that the Houthis, who have been attacking ships in the Red Sea, said to China, "Your ships will not be targeted. You're part of our coalition." Likewise, you see the Iranians acting in the United States, attempting to carry out assassinations and intimidations and actions like this, both on their own. 2 weeks ago, the FBI released the photograph of an IRGC operative known to be frequenting Venezuela and Florida, who is working to orchestrate the assassination of Mike Pompeo, our former Secretary of State, John Bolton, and maybe even Brian Hook, who all three of whom maintain around-the-clock Secret Service surveillance because of those threats. And so you have both China and Iran infiltrating the country with their services. China being more overt, trying to do this in a way that they suggest is good for everyone, but of course it's not acceptable. And when you see the degree to which the Chinese government is looking to stifle any dissent, the way they're the aggressive rhetoric that they're putting out about Taiwan and the military confrontation over Taiwan, when you see the degree to which they are acting aggressively to build artificial islands and long runways and things out into the ocean there, it's a problem. When they work to undermine the freedom of navigation of the seas and free trade, of which, of course, the United States has been the guarantor around the world for many decades. Why is the dollar the currency of international trade? Well, because the American military says trade is free. And there's a reason that, again, China is looking to work with Russia and others to create alternative currency paths to undermine the strength of the American financial system. So at every turn, whether it's political, security, or financial, they're out there being aggressive, attacking not only the people who are Chinese who speak out against their system, persecuting their own people, but they're being very aggressive in their efforts to attack here in the United States, as you mentioned, water treatment plants. Some of these major, last week, all of the pharmacies in America, or a substantial portion, had a problem distributing medicine. Today, most of the departments of motor vehicles around the country went down, and ID services were not available today. So there is something afoot here. And of course, China is not only one of the most aggressive in its physical repression of its people, and as we've seen with Mr. Chen, even here in the United States, but they're also one of the most aggressive in the use of cyber tools and cyber espionage and cyber attack. And of course, we haven't yet even talked about space. So, there's a comprehensive concern there. And again, it ranges from the very personal, the very human, where people like Mr. Chen, who come to the United States, who seek freedom, who seek to speak out and speak their mind, who make art, are the victims of coercive, underhanded, state-sponsored attacks that ultimately not only invade his privacy and his livelihood, but destroy his work. And that's typical of, I think, the kind of intimidation tactic and effort that the Chinese make from a microcosm of that individual to the larger scheme of things, where you mentioned the fentanyl trade, but also using the massive monopoly they have on the production of precursor chemicals for everyday medicines to exert a pressure and leverage on other countries in the world who need medicine for their people. So it ranges the gamut.
All right. Well, that was an extraordinary presentation. Very frightening. We haven't even gone into the military aspects. We haven't gone into the nuclear arsenal that China is establishing, its military muscle, its hypersonic missiles, its mischief that it's playing with Iran, supporting Iran and Russia and Hamas and others in its war.
Well, and Edwin, don't forget that China is trying to build the world's largest navy. And the reason you build a navy is to project power. The reason the United States is a global power is because we have the world's largest and most effective naval forces. That goes back to the Barbary pirates and all that, and all those things back in the day. But China's effort to build an even bigger blue water navy, deep water global navy, is again another sign that they intend to challenge American power, Western power, the rule of law, as the world knows it, in this great power competition. And you mentioned hypersonic weapons. The Chinese have an advantage in hypersonics at the moment. They have an advantage in space over us at the moment. They have a command economy, and they can direct these resources in ways that the United States free market has to be more creative and rely on other mechanisms to get to these achievements. Now, we've been very good over the years in leading in technology, but the Chinese have used so much espionage to spy and steal some of these ideas that it puts them in a strong position to copy and catch up and threaten us. And so in the great power competition of the future, you've got AI, quantum computing, hypersonics, directed energy weapons, space, a whole range of things that will be they will define the future of freedom and commerce in the world. And I say freedom because, freedom of speech. Obviously, the Chinese government has an interest in repressing speech. Here in the United States, sometimes we have a little bit too much free speech. Sometimes a little hate speech sneaks in there. But we are looking at the future of a world in which, if one country is able to get to quantum computing, they'll be able to break all of our codes. If they get to sophisticated AI beyond what we can do, it can be a danger to the world. It can control military systems in ways that it would be difficult to contend with. If they're, we've always practiced air superiority in all of our wars. What is air superiority? When you've got satellites above that can shoot directed energy lasers down to hit your planes. These are all very complicated questions, and they will be the ones that, as these technologies mature and the race to acquire them and perfect them settles itself out here in the next 10 to 15 years, those will be the outcomes that determine who gets to set the tone for freedom, tolerance, liberty, or repression as the currency and the trend of the world for the next 50, 75 years.
Let me put you on the spot. Are we talking about actual confrontation, kinetic or pseudo-kinetic, this decade or next decade?
Well, I think the Chinese have been very clear that they intend to act militarily against Taiwan in the near term, not in the next decade, in the next 10 years, let's call it, not in the next 20. And so I think one of the things the United States needs to recognize is that our posture relative to Russia, Iran, and other conflicts in the world sends a very clear signal to the Chinese about whether or not we will fight that aggression. And of course, we're treaty bound to help defend Taiwan. But it would, if you see the way the United States has hedged its bets against Russia with Ukraine, if I was the Chinese, I would be feeling pretty encouraged. If you see the way the administration is taking kind of a soft line with the Iranian nuclear program, I would be pretty encouraged in terms of my ability to go out and take what I want. I've seen Russia invade twice into Ukraine and once into Georgia. He can do whatever he wants. Are they less special than me, Mr. Xi thinks? So I think that they're likely to be rather aggressive and that we are going to have to respond to that. The most dangerous thing we can do is some of the things we're seeing now where Israel is in a big, difficult fight. And rather than standing shoulder to shoulder with our ally, and certainly human suffering in Gaza is terrible, but Hamas is trying to keep captive 2 million people to their extremism. It's terrible, 30,000 have died. But but they're holding hostage 2 million people to this suffering. So, if the United States doesn't stand shoulder to shoulder with its existing allies, like Israel, it sends a message to China that we're unlikely to stand by and defend Taiwan. And so they might as well go ahead with an invasion. And then in that case, since we're treaty bound to defend the country, we're going to end up in a military conflict with China. And the best way to avoid that is to act firmly and strongly now by bombing Iran's nuclear weapons infrastructure and showing both China and Putin that the United States is wildly unpredictable when it comes to the use of force, and they may not be able to predict our behavior. And we need to act soon and decisively to send that message.
All right. Now we have Josh is going to have to leave. He's got a hard stop in about 7 minutes. Let's go right to the questions. From the Watch Party in the Villages, which is Josh's favorite, will China open a front in the United States on U.S. territory in the event of a Taiwan invasion? And let me qualify that question and say this could be a front of the takedown of our grid, the takedown of our electrical systems, of our electronic infrastructure. Josh, what do you say?
Yeah, I think we're unlikely to see volumes of Chinese soldiers on American territory, but we do know for a fact that they've been laying traps inside our cyber systems, our networks for many years. The FBI just warned, of course, you mentioned the vulnerability of our water systems, of being able to poison water or shut off water. People can't get water. The ability to mess around with the gas supply, to mess around with, prescriptions in hospitals, to shut down communications. All of these things would cripple the United States' ability to function normally. Let's say all the ATMs in the country suddenly stopped working, and credit cards wouldn't work. How would people buy food? What would happen? How would the military communicate with itself? What if traffic lights stopped working? What if every Tesla in the country, Edwin, just suddenly stopped in the middle of the street wherever it is?
Well, they have that technology right now, as you well know. In fact, it's been written into the infrastructure bill that this technology to stop a car wherever it is must be built in. Let's go to the watch party in Newton, Mass. How could AOC claim RICO is not a crime, and why has the media ignored the conspiracy clause of the RICO statute? RICO's a crime. It's actually the crime that Trump and company are being prosecuted for. The state version in Georgia. It's technically RICO. You can be indicted for RICO conspiracy, even if you just drove the getaway car, even if you just provide a safe house, aiding and abetting, even if you just picked up the phone when they said, let me get the big guy on the phone. And then, as we see, shortly thereafter, Hunter Biden gets diamonds, he gets sports cars, and all of this other stuff. So I'm not sure why the media has ignored the conspiracy clause of the RICO statutes, but trust me, there are members of the House of Representatives who are not ignoring it, and I believe it's very, very real, because I know I've studied RICO for many years, and so have many others who agree with me. Josh, you have a comment on RICO and conspiracy clause?
Well, just in general, the RICO statutes are a very broad, very powerful statute that provide for great relief for victims of conspiracies that damage them. There have been a number of cases in which individuals have been hacked, had that material stolen, used in foreign courts to try to besmirch them, to attack their businesses. Some of these cases have been carried out by major American law firms and lawyers who have been representing the defendants, who then go hire forensics, consultants who then hire hackers who then do the hacking, and then all these. So these cases are also quite ripe for RICO, because what you have is a conspiracy amongst various players to undermine, defraud, hurt, harm, and defame individuals. And so the remedy to that is to go after them under these statutes, both civil and criminal. And the damages are important, because they're treble damages under many of these statutes, which means triple damages. So it can really be an important deterrent to those who think they can abuse their power.
And I should also emphasize that RICO requires two different aspects. One, the bad act, but two, it must be done within and involving the use of a commercial entity. And in this case, we have scores of not so secret anymore LLCs, 60 or 70 LLCs that were used to money launder the money. So, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, that's right. And I'm familiar with cases in which prosecutors are thrilled to have 12 or 13 counts of wire fraud or mail fraud, these acts of using these things in the conspiracy. I've seen a case with, 600 examples, 450 examples of wire fraud, 600 examples of mail fraud. So there are some incredibly damning cases out there that will expose bad actors for their conduct, including those who've engaged in this kind of behavior, whether they're Qatar or they're other actors in China, others. This is an important statute to be used, or if it's corruption.
Watch party in Chicago. What are the BRICS? BRICS, and what is China's role in it? Go ahead, Josh. BRICS.
Well, it's a great question. BRICS is a group of kind of the non-aligned countries, if you will. People may remember the non-aligned movement of the kind of 70s and 80s. Brazil, India, China, Russia, they are formed this alternate economic group and they're attempting to kind of build greater cohesion and power in it. I think we're likely to see that doesn't go flawlessly. There are a lot of differences among the various key players there, but their main goal is to try to create an alternative economic pathway, a different SWIFT, a different way to settle oil transactions, a way to circumvent and get around Western and traditional economic centrality, and avoid sanctions, and ultimately undermine the sort of the world as we know it post World War II.
Christine in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where they make the buses, by the way, the little yellow school buses. Will China invade Taiwan by 2027? Josh?
I think 2027 seems pretty likely. I do think there'll be some timing decisions made by Xi and China based on, of course, their own internal stability, economy, this kinds of thing, and also about who's elected president here in the United States. I don't know what'll happen in the next election. And I even though President Biden has made clear that the United States stands by its treaty obligations, I don't know whether they'll think Trump is more unpredictable. He's been pretty tough on China, Trump. Biden has maintained and strengthened some of the harsher measures that Trump wanted to put in place relative to China and its economy. So if Trump is elected, I think the Chinese might think even more cautiously about whether they wanted to act militarily.
We also have another question from Indiana. China is now the largest manufacturer of EVs, surpassing Tesla. I don't think I knew that. But Biden wishes to pass legislation ensuring that the majority of passenger cars sold in the U.S. are electric or hybrid by 2032. Doesn't this play into China's hands? And I think the answer is, of course, yes. The majority of Americans can't afford $50,000 to $90,000 for an EV car. They can't afford to sit around for 40 to 60 minutes waiting for a charge. I love the EV cars, but there are many other alternative fuel cars that could be sold, and these include hydrogen and ethanol and other volumetric types. It seems to me that these batteries, which are now producing contaminants, which are actually in our food supply, these are not good for the world. We're never going to be able to support them, and eventually will call for the collapse of the existing U.S. auto market, which is based on the internal combustion machine, which of course has to get cleaner, has to get better. And I should also say that this bogus thing about the CAFE standards, CAFE, that Biden has raised, that means that the automakers just need to make one zero emissions car. This is what Honda did to pretend it had great CAFE standards, and they would then be able to not sell that car to anyone, not produce that car, only lease that car. That's what Honda did. Kill the charging factors, the charging stations, so it doesn't proliferate. And now you've both acted like you increased the anti-pollution standards, and you've done nothing. Because remember, if the automakers are confronted with this immediate transition to electric vehicles, where there are no motors to speak of, and where there's virtually no spare parts to repair the bloodbath that the Chinese industry has promised us. And I've now seen about 18 major media sources use this term bloodbath after they were going crazy about Donald Trump. We will see a collapse. You can't force this. And I think there are better ways to solve this problem than asking regular people to spend $50,000 to $100,000 on electric infrastructure. You have anything to say about that,
Well, yeah, I mean, a couple things. Edwin. First of all, I think we will see the price of some of these cars come down, and maybe we'll see a $25,000 electric car. The problem is how do you compare the quality and the luxury? So when the Chinese come into the market, and for the same $25,000 or $35,000, they're offering you, a car that feels like it's just as nice as a car that is $50,000. What are you going to choose, right? So the problem is, and they're able to subsidize their markets in ways that are unfair. It's a problem. Now, here in the United States, our power grid, our electrical grid, doesn't have sufficient capacity to supply the amount of electricity required to power all these cars. Not now, not in 5 years, and not by 2030 or 32. And so there's a bit of a fallacy, I think, out there about this. So there needs to be a lot of work done to upgrade our electric infrastructure in the United States. Moreover, the production of that electricity isn't always very clean. As you mentioned, the mining of the minerals that are required for and the manufacture of these batteries creates a lot of pollutant and a lot of waste. The recycling of them is becoming something that people are sort of figuring out a little bit, but it creates a lot of waste. It's not clean. And so the whole puzzle of whether the EV transition is actually a tremendous move forward in terms of our environmental stewardship remains a bit up in the air. From an economic and geopolitical point of view, it does, and like the problem we have with the chip manufacturing, we've put ourselves in a pickle by offshoring a lot of manufacturing over the last 25 to 30 years. And when we do that, we lack a military industrial base to make the things that we need. And sometimes we think ahead, we say, oh, well, that kind of war is over. Or we will never need, we don't need more howitzers. We're going to use drones and stealth fighters, and we're going to do all these different things. Well, the war in Ukraine came along, and it's about conventional weapons. And it's about the ability to manufacture in high volumes and rapidly the kind of war material one needs. And if we don't maintain our production capabilities, if we go to no engines, as you say, if we go to these kind of electric-only devices, it's going to be very hard for us to pivot back when we need the kind of capable manufacturing infrastructure that we need. So we need to maintain both. I think it's one of the reasons you see the hybrid car become, whether it's a plug-in hybrid or the hybrid that has a battery and the engine charges it so you don't run out of power. You have gas in the car. I think those are likely to be a much more attractive technology to consumers for a long time, certainly until the charging infrastructure becomes ubiquitous, and the infrastructure allows it so that we have the capacity to serve the amount of electricity required to replace the fossil fuels that people won't be using without just burning more fossil fuels to make power. And by the way, we'd be doing that in a way that just hands our money largely to the Chinese, because that's where the batteries are made, and they're going to have a big advantage in making electric cars as they get into the global market.
And, I agree with you 100% on the hybrid car. As you know, I wrote the book, Internal Combustion. I studied this entire thing. And I believe it's the hybrid car, the both electric and gas-consuming car, that is going to be the bridge for the next couple of decades.
Until some other technology, right? I mean, it seems to me that you can get 60, 70 miles a gallon on those hybrid cars, and that's quite a bit. And if you want to go, until we come up with a better solution to the battery, or cleaner batteries, or batteries that last longer, or that don't require so much waste or so much weight, that bridge technology seems like it's going to have the capacity to do quite well. It was the choice of automakers on the basis of economics, that they felt they couldn't afford to manufacture both combustion and battery into the same car, and they wanted to get the tax breaks the government was pushing. And so many of them shied away from this hybrid model. But I think Toyota was stuck with it quite a bit, and others. And now I think people are coming back around to it. It's hard to imagine going all electric today, certainly with all of your cars. I just, it doesn't, with a family, when it's winter and the car only goes a certain amount of distance, and what if the electricity goes out and you can't charge? There's all these problems that exist. It's not a foolproof system. So no one can really rely on an electric car in the same way that they can rely on an internal combustion gas-driven automobile. It's just not the same thing.
I should say that the electric automobile was invented in 1835, and in the first decade of the 20th century, all the vehicles were electric vehicles. I should also say that the president of Hertz just resigned because his involvement in the EV fleet was a complete and utter flop. They can't sell these things. Everyone who wants an EV has already got one. If you look outside, they're all Teslas. And the F-150 Ford that Biden was test driving was using a battery that helped poison an entire village in the Amazon. Now, with that, I'm going to say we're out of time. I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 1 minute away. But first, I want to thank my talented guests, Carolyn Glick in Israel, Josh Block, great, in Washington, Chinese sculptor Weiming Chen and his translator, Jonas, in the California desert. I also thank my talented international crew, including Christine in Indiana, Holly and her family, wonderful people in Nashville. Wes, what a good guy, in San Francisco. Thank you for not asking a question. Eve in New Jersey, and Sims in South Africa, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. We all owe them. I'll see everybody back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to be very important. I'm going to tell you just how the Democrats are going to dispossess the American Jewish community. You want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show? Go to the edwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my websites for events. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple Books, Google Books, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust. You want an autographed copy? Hit my personal, newly redesigned website, edwinblack.com, and click books. Get access alerts to participate live in future shows at the edwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our beauteous YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show. Click the notification buttons like tens of thousands of others have, and you will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold, courageous, talented, international crew. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on whatever X is, as well as Facebook. And now, for my closing word of wisdom. When the persecution comes, the optimists will die and the pessimists will live. I'm zooming out from our nation's capital. Bless you all. Bye-bye.